talking the last few months, it's really there's a differentiation being made now. Some countries have, and I think it's on the current account. Some countries, such as Thailand, have good current account balances, and therefore they are perceived as being better able to weather risks down the road. Whether this is a risk from
The Fed.
Yeah, the Fed
Rate
raising
increase.
rates, or maybe an external shock, maybe a eurozone crisis again if they're not able to resolve something, or maybe a Brexit shock if you see that down the road. So those countries with good current account deficits are seen as having the ability to absorb these kinds of shocks. And the Philippines, maybe for different reasons, whether it's stagnant semiconductor export growth, or maybe a sense that foreign exchange remittances from our workers might be declining, is seen as not as robust as these countries. So I think right now, if you're just talking of the last 2 to 3 weeks where we've seen this, it's more the current account technicals that maybe foreigners are looking at. In the world of finance, they just, you're asked to choose between investing in maybe 10 or 15 emerging markets. So they look for what are the quick and good measures for the moment of seeing which ones could be vulnerable in the short term.
And the flavor right now is current account.
Is probably the current account deficit or the current account position. It
The
could be
next
the
measure?
concept of structural reform, right? They'll say, which countries are structurally more able to implement reforms down the road, whether it's tax reforms to cope with slowing economies. That could be the flavor of the day. If oil prices move up or down significantly, it might be, the resource producers might be the next ones who are seen as vulnerable. So, or if something bad happens to oil, let's say oil goes down again, and then people say, Saudi's going to suffer, which is the source of Philippine OFW remittances, or the Gulf, then that might be the flavor of the day. Who are the remittance countries, right? You've seen Mexico suffer, go up and down depending on the perceptions of how trade and migration will flow, depending on what the new U.S. administration does. So I'd say it's the flavor of the day. They've been a factor. Obviously, as I said, they're not the determining factor now, right? But they have been factors because the perception that the Philippines has certain vulnerabilities, whether it is, President Duterte getting into a fight with what you call the elites in this country or the middle class over the drug war, whether it is because of how U.S. economic policies might become more nationalist and how they might, restrict immigration, so we suffer fewer H-1Bs, or vulnerabilities related to what happens in the Gulf, where if oil prices don't recover, if they fall too low, and our countrymen start losing their jobs. So there is the politics affects the perception of vulnerability. So at the end of the day, it's not going to change things overnight, but some people might say, okay, I'm going to hold a certain amount of Philippine assets. They'll say, maybe if the Philippines is seen as having all these risks, although they're not happening yet, I'll hold less related, or in comparison with me holding Thailand assets or some other emerging market.